Now, it would be easy to suggest that it's just some of the outcomes from our work, like social networks, that lead to group polarization and the sort of dark echo chambers that are tearing, unfortunately, at some of the fabric of our society at the moment, particularly in Western democracies. I don't want to get too sort of dystopian on things here, but we don't have to look too hard to see it show up in our own organizations and design community, do we?
No.
Yeah. You raised this, and I thought you were really brave. You raised this publicly, and it's not often that you get a design leader raising the mirror on the design community without, I suppose, some fear of repercussion. And I know that sounds a bit scary, but, let's be honest, design Twitter can be a bit of a toxic place from time to time. How do we as designers sometimes get it wrong about what we feel about the people that are outside of design, whether that be inside our own organizations or just people that don't think like us? What are some of the ways in which that shows up?
Yeah, and I tell a story in that talk about, I was kind of at a sort of offsite with lots of designers and UX people, and maybe it was maybe it needed to be a little bit cathartic, but there was lots of sort of complaining about the product owners and the decision makers and how they were kind of they were sort of like that they didn't care about the users, and that they were sort of the only they were the researchers and designers were the only people that actually cared about the users. And I say in the talk, I sort of I said it was hypocritical, which was not a good thing to do, because like that's actually doing exactly all of these things that I'm trying not to, which is sort of not actually listening. Yeah, I know. There's what's that, hoisted by my own petard, or whatever that saying is. Yeah. But I think
you quoted a really interesting quote by Peter Levine, who I didn't know before, but he seems to be to be a psychotherapist or some form of therapist. And the quote that you gave, which I think sums up what you're saying here, is you can't be curious and defensive at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of in what all of those things we've talked about, right? Like at TradeMe, they couldn't be defensive about we don't have a sexism problem and be curious about what they might have. I can't be defensive about how there's no racism in me and be curious about how kind of what I might be doing might be affecting other people. And and it was the same with this. So, it's I think that kind of what I said at that time was that actually we might have these end users, but the people who are building the product are actually our users as well. And if we're asking the sort of product people or decision makers to really care about their users, but we're not caring about those people, then that was kind of where the hypocritical bit dropped out. But and I think that and sort of in any group, it's really easy to sort of other another group and say that they don't understand. But I think that if you first go, okay, well, what am I doing and what am I bringing to this, and kind of seek to understand, then you're going to kind of get a hell of a lot further along than actually just sort of continuing to ram down kind of what you're thinking or your own perspective. So one of the things that we did at Xero was actually we all went and interviewed a product manager and actually asked them a whole lot of questions about what their life was like, and and it was so enlightening and kind of so helpful to actually sort of understand kind of what the world looked like from their point of view, and that they actually really did want to be user-centered, and that they often were having to make really big decisions without full information, which is a blooming hard thing to have to do. So if our report is going to be another 2 weeks later, and then we say, oh, they ignored our report, it's probably because they had to make a decision in that kind of sprint that actually they kind of needed that information straight away. And so, I think it was kind of just, I think what we ask of other people to be empathetic about their users, we have to kind of do for ourselves as well.